forgot something, the teacher would say, oh, John, it's not a problem. Come again. We'll try again tomorrow. You know, and they call my mom and say, Mrs. Lessica, can you make sure you put the 25 cents in the book bag? But I think something happened in 4th grade where the teacher said, you know what, John, you didn't do it. There's a problem. At the academy, that may happen in 2nd grade. It may happen in 3rd. It may happen in 1st. But probably somewhere in those first couple years it happens. And that's when the child first starts to have trouble. The inattentive child. What is it like to be one of us? When I like something, we can focus very well. In fact, we almost may have a hyper-focus if we like something. But when I sat in class, if you were speaking, after about 3 minutes, 4 minutes, even if I was sitting at the front of the class, I'd decide this was not where I wanted to be. Didn't even have the conscious thought. So we forget things. You can talk to me, my wife will tell me things, I'll smile, I nod, I love her, I've been married 30 years, and honest to God, if I don't catch myself, I don't know what she said. I'm embarrassed. It's not something that as an adult I feel proud of, but it still happens. So you can talk to the ADD child, but if you tell him, Johnny, pick up your socks, if he doesn't do it right then and there, he probably will not do it. And so unless you understand how to deal with us, it doesn't mean I'm not asking you to pity us, but you have to understand how to deal with us if you're really going to help us succeed. So the inattentive child, we lose things, we forget things, we procrastinate, we daydream. You can put math homework in front of us. It could take 5 minutes for everyone else. It could take us an hour and a half. Okay? There's no pleasure, I can assure you, sitting there for an hour and a half. But it's just that we get lost. So there are things that we'll talk about later on in terms of interventions that might help. When the child with ADD likes something, if it's geography, if it's math, sometimes children have special gifts. They might do very well in that class. But a class equally as simple or equally as challenging, they might have horrible times with. So we're very inconsistent with our performance. And the performance can change from month to month. If I'm failing math today, I can focus this month on that. And now English that I was doing very well in, I'm now failing. So being able to perform consistently across the spectrum is hard for us. So the wonderful things about ADD, because I'm telling you some of the bad things. You know, 200 years ago, if I was in the forest, I was probably the person who saw something bad happening down the road. My poor wife is wonderful, but we walked through Washington, D.C. once, and a policeman was taking down a robber, literally as close as Mary Gill. And Katie walked right by, didn't see it, had no clue. I said, honey, did you see that? See what? So the ADD soul sees everything, whereas the person who's focused may miss half of the world. The trouble is when I see everything, I may miss the most important thing you're trying to tell me. So in fairness, there are some positives. So if you have an ADD child, if you're ADD, it's not the worst thing in the world. But the symptoms on that list, whether it's the inattentive, whether they're the daydreaming, whether the hyperactive, the impulsive, those are symptoms. To be labeled ADD, you have to have those symptoms at least for 6 months. To be labeled ADD, if you have all of those symptoms, but you're a wonderful wife, you have great kids, you maintain your job, you shouldn't be on medicine. Now, you may be aware that you have the condition and you may need to learn some tricks to address it, but you don't need to be on medicine. So you might say, well, gee, Dr. Lessica, why did you volunteer to come here today? Because what you've told us, we already knew. You know, most of us we've gone online and we've checked the list. The thing that bothers me most about ADD is that it's a destructive seed. It's a seed that sets up good parents, good children, good schools to have dysfunction. So that's the part I hope we can stop today. That's the part I hope we can catch your attention. If your child has ADD, I promise before we finish, I'll talk about tricks that your child can do. But what happens to the ADD child? If we're 3 and 4 and we're hyper, then probably Johnny's being told, Johnny, sit still. Johnny, be quiet. Johnny, 1 minute. Johnny, Johnny, Johnny. How does Johnny start to feel?
Insecure.
Not so good. Maybe insecure. So what we know is that for most children with ADD, they start with simple, pure ADD. But most children with ADD, usually by the time they're 7 or 8, will develop something called dysthymia. It's a big word. D-Y-S-T-H-Y-M-I-A. What does that mean? It means that you have a great kid who doesn't feel so good. You'll hear us as we walk away from you saying, I'm stupid. I can't do anything right. I'll never please you. And sometimes they cry. Sometimes they look angry. Most of the time we think they're just sort of acting out. But the truth is that child really, truly can feel quite discouraged inside. What else is dysthymia? It means you have a wonderful kid that starts to doubt. I can't do it. I better not raise my hand. I better not take a chance. Well, what happens to that child? So usually by 7 or 8, we have a child who has dysthymia. What happens the next time when I'm a 4th grader and Miss Geiger said, John, what play did you go see? This is a true story. John Lessica's parents are immigrants from Yugoslavia, and my parents are wonderful people, but my dad was a painter, my mom was a housewife. We didn't have money to go see a play in Manhattan, even though we lived in Queens. So being a very creative ADD soul, I looked in the Daily News and saw there was a play called Oh, Calcutta. Have any of you seen the play?
Yes.
I have not seen it, but I understand there's either nude scenes or it's a nude play. I don't know what. But I decided, being a very creative ADD soul, I'm embarrassed by this, but it's true, and I know it's on tape. I read up on Calcutta, India with I can't remember which Encyclopedia Britannica, and made a little story up for Miss Geiger. So here I am in 4th grade Catholic school, and I'm saying, well, Miss Geiger, Oh, Calcutta was a wonderful play about this family in India, and it just taught me so much about Calcutta. And she said, oh, John, that's so wonderful. And she had obviously either seen the play or heard of the play. She says, well, why don't you come in and tell Mother Superior and Father Lyons, the pastor, and let's bring your mom and dad in. So that was my first and probably most important discovery, that fibbing to stay out of trouble caused me much more trouble. So what happens to the ADD child? Your son, your daughter. Johnny, did you do your homework? Yes, Mom. Honey, did you throw out the garbage? Yes, Mom. Did you make your bed? Yes, Mom. And most of the time we haven't done it. So what happens to the wonderful parent when you go upstairs and the bed is unmade and the teacher sends back a report on Friday to say the homework's not done? How do we react? Most of us are great parents, but most of us get frustrated. We yell, we scream, we ground them for life. So how does Johnny feel? Worse. So that goes on for a couple years. But usually by about the time they're 9 or 10, 10 or 11, it's seeming to get younger. And you'll have the child start to say, I didn't do it, he did it, she did it. We lie, we blame others. Nothing's our fault. If you look at us the wrong way, what do you think? So we get grumpy, we get irritable. Most parents say, son, you're not going to do that. You're going to respect me, so we ground you even more. Well, what happens when Johnny's 14 and 15 and now has access to a vehicle here at the academy? One of his friends drives. Well, all of a sudden, we don't feel so connected at home. And when you sass back, talk back, lie, that's called oppositional defiant. Very common. It's normal for most teenagers to get a little sassy, but it's different with oppositional defiant. Okay? So what happens is you have the simple ADD child, but now you have a 5th grader who's sassing back, talking back, and lying. And most of us get more frustrated. And then what happens by early high school or late middle school is that Johnny decides to hang out with the kids who get in trouble because they can relate, they're all good kids, they all feel rejected by teachers, by parents, by society, and then they're the ones that are more likely, although the good kids, quote unquote, can still do it, they're more likely to be the ones that get into mischief, where they may start smoking, they may start drinking, they may start vandalizing. In New York City, kids with ADD did lots of bad things. I don't think they do them quite so often here in Fayetteville, at least I don't hear of it. But good kids, great parents, really, really sad outcomes. If you look at ADD beyond high school, what do we see? If you go into the prison system, a lot of the people that actually end up in prison, a lot of people that have recurrent issues with substance abuse, with recurrent issues with, I think divorce, we used to attribute to ADD, and I could see being married to an ADD cell would be challenging, but even divorce and marital discord have been attributed to ADD. So ADD is really a gift that keeps giving if we don't put a stop to it. So your presence here today is important. That one, if your child has ADD, and only ADD, you're blessed. If your child is starting to voice, I'm stupid, I can't do it, then that's a sign. It's a warning sign that we should open our eyes and realize that your child is great, you're great, the school's great, but we have to do something different. If you reach